Now, I just stumbled on a potential XRP price that sounds completely, unimaginable, insane, and I need to tell someone or talk to someone about it. Just imagine, right, waking up to see XRP's price at triple digits. Now, I'm talking over $100 per coin. It sounds like fiction, right? Well, I asked an AI to crunch some numbers, and the results had me practically spitting out my coffee, right? There was a twist though, right? So don't go quitting your day job just yet, right? So the other day, right, I'm kind of sipping on my espresso, scrolling through, crypto news as one does, and I see this headline about tokenized real-world assets and XRP. It basically hinted that if Ripple's XRP ledger grabs a big chunk of the tokenization trend, well, the XRP price could do something pretty crazy. Now, my eyebrows, of course, went way up. I've been around the block with XRP for a while, and I've heard wild price predictions before, but this, it had a new angle to it, right? Tying XRP's value to real-world asset tokenization on the XRP ledger, also known as the XRPL. Now that got my curiosity gears turning, right? How crazy could it really get? Could XRPL really become the kind of go-to platform for things like tokenized stocks and real-world estate, right? And real-world assets, whatever it is. And so, if so, I should say, what would that actually mean for the price of XRP in my own wallet? Well, I decided to embark on a little kind of fact-finding adventure then. And trust me, it turned into a roller coaster of speculation, hope, and a good healthy dose of skepticism. So by the end of this story, we're going to have traveled from the kind of solid facts to the borderline fantasy and back again. And hey, you might want to stick around, because even if the $134 XRP scenario sounds far-fetched, the journey to kind of figure it out was, well, just a little bit eye-opening. So let's set the stage. Why would people suddenly be talking about real-world assets, RWAs for short, and XRP in the same breath? Well, it starts with the big idea in crypto right now, tokenization. Basically taking real-world stuff, think real estate, stocks, bonds, even fine art, and representing ownership of it on a blockchain. It's like kind of turning physical or traditional financial assets into tokens that can trade 24/7, settle really fast, and be fractionally owned, right? Pretty cool. And apparently a lot of people think that this is the next big wave. Even Ripple, the company behind XRP, is beating the drum on this one. In a recent report, Ripple straight up said that crypto custody, how institutions safely hold digital assets, is becoming super important. They called custody the gateway for institutions entering the market. And the interesting part here is that they actually linked this custody demand to a coming boom in the tokenized real-world asset space. In plain English, Ripple's betting that if big players start tokenizing assets, they're going to need secure ways to hold those tokens. So custody solutions better be ready. And Ripple, well, they have an opportunity for XRP and the XRPL in the mix. In fact, some Ripple execs have been actually hinting that XRPL is pivoting towards being a platform for these real-world asset tokens. The XRP ledger isn't just for XRP transactions. It actually can handle all kinds of tokens, and apparently they want a slice of that RWA pie. Now, the Ripple CTO, that's David Schwartz, said back in 2023 that XRPL's new focus is RWA tokenization. When David kind of talks, I listen. He's a pretty candid guy, right? And it's not been, at least not just kind of Ripple themselves, I should say, that's saying this. I've even seen that an investment firm, Bitwise, chimed in saying that buying XRP could be a straightforward way to actually invest in the whole tokenization trend. That's a big statement if you think about it, right? They've implying, or at least they are implying here, that XRP might be a proxy for owning a piece of the future where assets live on blockchains. So yeah, right, my intrigue level was off of the charts at this point. Now, let's do a little kind of drop intro reality for just a second here and look at where things actually stand as of today. right? Tokenized real-world assets on all blockchains right now are, worth around $26.44 billion. Sounds like a lot of money, right? I mean, any number with a billion after it is nothing to kind of sneeze at. But for context here, the global real estate market alone is like worth hundreds of trillions of dollars. So 26 billion in tokenized assets is actually a very tiny drop in a very vast bucket. We're still very early here, which is kind of exciting, right? Now, out of that $26.4 billion of tokenized pie, guess how much lives on the XRP ledger? About $302 million worth. So that's roughly 1.1% of all tokenized RWA value that's out there today. In other words, XRPL's slice of the RWA pie is actually pretty slim at the moment. And what's the price of XRP today? Roughly $2.90 per coin, give or take, with a market cap of around $172 billion. Since there are about 59.4 billion XRP coins in circulating supply. So XRP is just chilling at just under $3 as we speak then here's where I guess the gears in my head start turning, right? If XRPL currently has only 1% of the tokenized asset market and XRP is around $2.90, what would happen if XRPL's share wasn't 1%, but more like 20%, a much bigger piece of the pie? And not of today's pie, but of a future, hopefully much larger pie. Would 20%, right? Why? And you might actually, I should say, why would you think 20%? Well, honestly, this is actually partly because the article that I read posted the exact scenario, right? Also, 20% is ambitious, but it's not outright crazy either if you assume multiple players will kind of split the market. Kind of like XRPL being one of the top platforms among maybe 4 or 5. Now, my imagination, of course, was officially on fire at this point. Now, I'm not gonna just kind of let my imagination with real numbers kind of get better of me, right? Math and I have a love-hate relationship, so I enlisted some AI help here. Specifically, I turned to Google's Gemini AI, which is this kind of new chatbot that's supposed to kind of be super smart. So I basically asked it, if XRPL captures 20% of the tokenized real-world asset market by 2026, what might XRP's price be? Now, I half expected it to kind of scold me for even asking for financial predictions, and indeed it did start with the whole too many unknowns, can't give precise forecasts caveat, but then it kind of humored me with a hypothetical scenario, and this is kind of where things went completely off the rails. Now, according to the chatbot's reasoning, by 2026, the total value of tokenized real-world assets could grow to around $70 billion. That's up from 26 billion now. So they're implying that the market could nearly triple in the next year. Sounds reasonable, maybe. It's a kind of guess, but it's not impossible given the growth rate that we are seeing at the minute. So, okay, now 20% of $70 billion means about $14 billion worth of assets tokenized on the XRPL. Still following me, right? Cool. Now comes the spicy part then. Right, then the AI looked at XRP's situation today as a baseline. It noted that right now XRP's market cap is around $172.6 billion and is kind of tied to that kind of $302 million of RWA on the XRPL. So if you kind of make a ratio of 172.6 billion divided by the 302 million equals roughly 571 to the 1. Meaning that basically for every dollar of RWA on the XRPL's ledger, then XRP's market cap is about $571. Now, is that ratio meaningful or just coincidence? Debatable, but what's the number? Is the number that we kind of got here? So here's where I nearly fell out of my chair. A chatbot said that if that 571 to 1 relationship held in the future, and XRPL indeed had $14 billion of RWAs on it, then by that math, XRP's market cap would also balloon to somewhere between, or at least north, I should say, and near to $8 trillion. And yes, trillion with a T. So for context, $8 trillion is like the combined market cap of some of the biggest companies on the planet. It's kind of like the number of so large in crypto terms that I had to blink and check if I had accidentally added a zero, but that's what 571 times 14 billion actually gives you, around $8 trillion. Now, take that potential $8 trillion market cap and divide it by the number of XRP coins that are out there, about 59.4 billion of them. And drum roll, I have a table here, drum roll, right? You get roughly $134.5 per XRP, so $134.50 per coin. And when I saw that, I figured, I had one of those no way, this is too good to be true moments. Now my first thought was, I got to tell my, buddies all about this on the Discord server, right? They're gonna absolutely flip out on it, right? So it kind of felt like I just asked, what if I invest in this lottery ticket? And the AI responded, congratulations, you won the entire lottery. Total fantasy vibes at first glance, right? Now, at this point, you might be thinking, is this guy actually buying this $134 price prediction? Well, let me be crystal clear. No, not without a Mount Everest-sized grain of salt. So in fact, let me kind of take a step back and hit pause on the whole hype for just a second, because it's disclaimer time. Now this one might just shock you, but I'm not a financial advisor, and nothing in this video is financial advice. Cryptocurrencies are highly volatile, and you could lose all of the money that you invest. You should always do your own research and consult a qualified professional. After all, your investments are entirely your responsibility, and you should know that nothing is ever guaranteed when it comes to investing. Neither I, this channel, nor YouTube are liable for any losses, and this video today is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Alright, it's time to breathe. Right, we got the disclaimer out there and it's out of the way, so let's refocus and unpack this properly then. Right, the idea of XRP hitting $134 in just a few months, while extremely intriguing, is one of those perfect storm scenarios then. Right, the chatbot itself basically waved a big yellow caution flag as it gave the number. It kind of stressed that this was highly simplified projection. The whole calculation assumes a rather neat linear relationship. More tokenized assets on the XRPL equals perpetually rise in XRP's value. But we all know that the real world loves to mess with rather neat formulas. So for example, not that long ago, the amount of RWA on the XRP ledger jumped up to that $302 million level. And you'd think, oh wow, did XRP's price react? And no, barely a blip. XRP didn't suddenly go 571x just because the RWA on the XRPL went up by 1x. So if only it were that easy, right? In reality, XRP's price is influenced by a bunch of different things. Overall, crypto markets love sentiment, and Ripple's legal news is there, demand for the XRP payments and remittances, speculative trading, and yes, possibly the growth of real-world asset tokenization on the XRP ledger. But that's just one factor among many of its impact, right? And I guess I should say many, and its impact isn't as straightforward as many might think. Now, let's unpack, or pick apart, I should say, why dumping $14 million of tokenized assets onto the XRPL by 2026 might not send XRP to the moon in a straight line. First off, utility versus speculation. Just because assets are tokenized on the XRPL doesn't mean people need to hoard XRP. Those assets might be, denominated in their own tokens, like a token that represents a share of, Apple's stock, for example, or a real estate token, right? They can exist on the XRPL without touching XRP directly. And XRP is used for paying transactions, fees, and maybe as a bridge currency if you're swapping between different assets. But fees on the XRPL are famously tiny, like a fraction of a penny. So even if XRPL usage skyrockets, the direct buying pressure on the XRP token might only increase just a little bit from actual utility needs. So what about investor perception though, right? Well, now that's a wild card, right? If the market believes that the XRPL is becoming the backbone for a $1 trillion tokenized asset market, speculators might start valuing XRP higher, sort of pricing a future potential, right? But crypto often trades on narratives as much as reality. The narrative of XRP will underpin all of the tokenized assets, so could drive, of course, the demand. But again, whether it's 571 times demand is dubious, right? Also, the time that it's, the time it's obvious XRPL, is hosting tons of assets, right? The market could just price a lot of that in before it actually happens. Or maybe it'll never actually fully price it in if people aren't convinced that translates to XRP value. There's also the matter of competition, right? The XRPL is not the only player eyeing the tokenized to this tokenization space, right? Ethereum has a big kind of head start with things like stablecoins and even some real-world asset projects. There are newer specialized blockchains popping up specifically for tokenization, aiming to be compliant with regulations. So if the XRPL getting a full 20% slice actually means it has to beat out a lot of the others, for that business. It's possible, of course. XRPL is fast and cheap, and Ripple has connections with banks and institutions, which could give it an edge in certain use cases. But 20% isn't a kind of gimme, right? It could and would be a result of rather hard work and maybe some good luck or superior tech. So let's entertain the kind of thought that XRPL does succeed big time. What then? Well, could XRPL's, at least XRP's price rise significantly as a result? Well, I would say logically yes, right? Significantly on the table, is on the table, but if 2026 we actually see XRPL carrying, let's say, $14 billion of tokenized real-world assets, then I bet XRP won't still be $2.90. It could be higher, maybe a lot higher than today, but $134 higher? That feels like a stretch, unless, of course, the entire crypto market is still in a massive bull run and everything is 10xing. Anyway, remember, right, the XRP token is, for it to be kind of $134, its market cap would have to be north of $8 trillion. That's more than the entire market cap of gold, and gold's had, a few millennia to accrue value. So it would basically mean XRP is one of the most valuable financial assets on the planet. It's not impossible, of course, in theory, but never say never in crypto. But, and it's a big but, if that does happen, I should say, will it even happen by 2026? You have my permission to call me a lousy skeptic, I guess, but I don't think so. Now, I'd like to think of the $134 scenario not as a prediction, but as a thought experiment that tells us, hey, if tokenization really does take off and the XRPL is a major hub for it, well, XRP's upside could be huge. It's an illustrating the possibility or the possible scale of impact here, not a guaranteed outcome, right? Even the AI this is just to show the scale, don't take it to the bank. Now, it's kind of like if you ask, what if my $5,000 car was suddenly as popular as a Ferrari, and someone says, well, then you could be worth $200,000, right? It's true if demand and perception change that much, right, over a short period of time, sure, but what would it actually take to get there, right? A miracle, basically. And it's the same for XRP to get to a degree, right? To get that kind of valuation, something fundamental, has to shift beyond just one use case rather growing. Now, let me kind of slip in a little kind of personal anecdote here, because back in 2017, when I first got into crypto, I remember hearing, outlandish price targets, $10, $100, even the infamous $589. Now, at the time, XRP was like 20 cents, and I wanted to believe the crazy numbers, but experience had taught me to temper my expectations. If you always assume a coin will go to the moon, you're either going to become delusioned, or you're going to become one of those hopium junkies that never actually sells and just watch the gains evaporate. Now, I'm determined not to be, either of those. So nowadays, I just treat these big predictions as fun what-ifs. They make great conversations, especially with fellow crypto nerds on our Discord server. Speaking of which, quick plug, we have got a free educational Discord server. The link is in the description, right? It's where we hash out all of these sorts of topics, crypto topics, just like this one. It's a good time, and you should probably join us there, right? But don't bet my money on any of them. So, something that I do take seriously, though, however, is staying informed and, of course, being prepared. Now, when I see a bold scenario like XRP potentially reaching triple digits, I use it as a reminder to check my own strategy, right? And do I have an exit plan? If XRP ever did go parabolic, am I comfortable, with how much I actually have, right, and how much I hold right now? These are questions worth asking right now, not when, euphoria is high. Now, personally, I keep a chunk of my XRP on a secure exchange where I can act if needed. Now, lately I've been using Kraken Pro for a lot of my trading. It's been reliable for me and has pretty sweet low fees. Shameless plug though, and shout out, I've actually got an affiliate link for Kraken Pro and it's in the description down below. So if you are looking for a solid exchange and you want to use my link to sign up and trade via it, then it does help support the channel here at no extra cost to yourself. It's totally up to you and there is no hard feelings if you do not. Anyway, making sure that I cannot actually take any profits during a spike is part of the game, right? Because gains aren't real until you actually realize them, right? It's very important. Anyway, back to our story here. After running this whole exercise, where I do, all of these kind of talking kind of head videos, where do I stand? Well, honestly, I kind of feel energized about XRP's potential, but also kind of grounded on one hand, I've got this kind of imaginative kind of scenario where XRP goes to $134, like something out of an XRP maximalist daydream. And on the other hand, I have a kind of reality there, we're at $2.90 and nothing in crypto is ever guaranteed. The truth is probably going to be somewhere in between these two extremes. If tokenization of the asset becomes the norm, it could of course lift many boats in the crypto sea, XRP included. Maybe XRP hits a new all-time high because of it, maybe it doesn't. What I'll be watching is, not some magic price target, but the actual growth of the XRPL's use cases. And more projects issuing tokens on the XRPL. Are institutions choosing to use it over other chains, for certain assets? Is liquidity deepening there? Those developments might not, generate flashy headlines like XRP to $500, but they're kind of what could actually drive at least the lasting value. So in the end, I think the biggest kind of takeaway from my little adventure today is this: scale matters, right? We often kind of lack imagination for how big things can get if adoption really does kick in. $70 billion in tokenized assets by 2026 as the AI positioned might even be conservative if things really do go well. Some experts are throwing around multi-trillion-dollar forecasts by 2030 for tokenized markets. So if those come even partly true, then there's a lot of pie to actually share among blockchains. XRPL doesn't need to win it all to benefit. Just getting a decent slice could actually make a huge difference. But also, value doesn't automatically trickle down to, well, at least one-to-one to token prices either, right? It takes market dynamics, speculation and speculative interest, and of course economic design, like how the token captures value, to really actually move the needle. Now I know, stop hedging and just tell us if you secretly believe in the $134 XRP, right? Fine, I'll say this, right? I won't be planning on $134 by 2026, but if by some cosmic alignment it did happen, you bet that I'll be the happiest guy on the planet, and probably a little bit terrified, because that would mean that crypto is an insane bubble, or XRP basically took over the world. My personal target is much more down to earth than based on incremental growth and not overnight miracles. So as we wind down here, let me kind of reflect for just a second. This whole discussion started with a curiosity and a what if. It turned into a deeper look into what actually drives value for XRP. And I went from wide-eyed dreaming back to, pragmatic kind of thoughts. And, I think that balance is very important, exactly what is needed in crypto. Dream big, but also stay rational. If nothing else, this is it's all for fun, and it was a fun thought experiment, and kind of gave me a chance, I guess, to learn more about the corner of the crypto world that could be huge in just a few short years. I mean, I didn't even know until recently that the XRPL had any real-world assets tokenized on it at all. Now I know it's about 1% of the market and growing. Knowledge is power, right? So, will the XRPL really secure 20% of the tokenized RWA market by 2026 and send XRP to the moon? I have my doubts. It'll kind of play out as as it does, and it won't be as perfect as maybe some might think. But you can bet that I'm going to be watching the tokenization space like a hawk. And you know what? Maybe 2 years from now, we'll all look back at this video and say, wow, that was surprisingly on point. Or maybe, remember when we thought $70 billion in tokenized assets was going to be a big deal? Now, either way, I'm here for the journey, and I'm glad to have you guys with me to share it. So if you found this useful, make sure to smash that like button, and I'll catch you all in the next one.